Leadership Story Talks, where we discuss the practices that engage, motivate, develop, retain, and attract people to businesses. We'll give you principles and tools based on real-world stories to leverage listening and storytelling to become a better leader and management professional. Leadership Story Talks is produced by Narrative, a company that focuses on personal storytelling for business.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. In this podcast, Julian Ryan and I, Jerome DeRoy, discuss ways in which we can create more engagement in our lives, especially at work. There are more people that say that they are disengaged at work than those who feel they are engaged at work. We come from Narrative, which is a storytelling company, and we are devoted to engaging people at work, engaging their customers, engaging their employees, and we do this through a 7-step method. Now, we know a lot about listening and storytelling and a lot of other topics that have to do with engagement, but we certainly don't pretend that we know everything. And hence this podcast, why we started having these conversations, Julian and I, and then having guests as well. And today we have a guest, a really special guest that I'm very, very happy to have. And his name is Garrett Richardson. He's also better known as Mr. G to the youth he serves. And he's committed his life's work to improving life outcomes for historically underserved youth, especially boys and young men of color. During his time in K-12 education, Garrett has designed various co-curricular programming, both during and after school, to support students in needs. In the summer of 2016, he designed New York City's first My Brother's Keeper High School chapter in Queens. In 2 short school years, the Queens program matched 100 boys to in-school peer mentors and improved participants' daily school attendance rates by an average of 8% compared to the previous school year. This initiative inspired Garrett to create his consultant agency, Bridge the Gap, in 2018. It's a small but mighty team of education and youth service professionals with nearly 40 years of experience transforming organizational culture through culturally competent training for staff and social emotional supports for young people facing significant challenges in school and or in life. In addition to leading Bridge the Gap, Garrett's a member of the social services team at Bloomberg Associates, which is the philanthropic consulting arm of Michael Bloomberg's charitable organization, Bloomberg Philanthropies. And in this role, he works with client cities to improve the quality of life for residents, taking a strategic, collaborative, and results-oriented approach to make cities more equitable. His work includes the management of municipal efforts that are part of the Obama Foundation's My Brother's Keeper Community Challenge. So Garrett, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And thank you for pushing through that bio. I always get a little anxious, a little awkward nervousness hearing about your accomplishments, but I'm getting more comfortable. So thank you, Jerome, for helping my comfort. It's a pleasure to be on.
You're so welcome and great to have you. Yeah, Jules,
the intro's not over.
Yeah, the intro's not over. We got a slightly less formal one.
Okay. Well, we always like to be transparent when we're doing our storytelling, and this is another example that I've had the pleasure of knowing Garrett for a wonderful number of years. And it came to be because I've always been involved in mentorship programs. And for a period of time, I joined iMentor, a high school advocacy for going to college for students within New York City. And Garrett was one of my supervisors to make sure that I and other volunteers were doing right by the program, doing right by the students. And we had terrific conversations. He impressed me. He was gracious. He was patient. He was everything you want to hear, and you'll hear more later. But I just wanted to say welcome, and I'm so excited to see you in person today, or at least in the cyberspace world, and also to been following you and your career as you've taken amazing steps forward to really raise your voice and raise the purpose of mentorship. So congrats and welcome, and back to you, Jerome.
Thanks, Jules. So maybe, Garrett, we can start off. Obviously, your bio is it seems to be totally guided by this value of mentorship, and there's definitely a kind of a pattern there. And so I'm wondering, how did that come to be, this passion that then became clearly the core of your career seems to be revolving around mentorship. How did that come to be?
Yeah, thank you, Jerome. And it's always good to see you, Jules, of course. It's a pretty amazing to see how the world works and bringing us back together. I'm very grateful to be connected to you still in this work. To answer your question more directly, Jerome, I can't call a specific moment, although I'm sure there's particular stories that'll come up in conversation. But I'll talk about my first kind of real job out of college when I graduated. I graduated in 2008, right? So, that's like the height of an economic recession. And unfortunately, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to work with young people. Ever since probably going back to my days as an adolescent, I just remember having, adults, caring adults. Many of them were teachers. Some were relatives, extended families, members, and things of that nature. And I knew that I was, guided, that saying, right? It takes a village, right, to raise a child. And, I looked around one day, I looked at my village of all these individuals, some names that I knew and some that I didn't. And, they all helped me tell my story, the reason why I am here today. And so I just wanted to help build more villages for more young people, because there's just so many young people who just don't have that caring adult or just a caring friend, someone to listen to them, something to help guide them. And I'm a firm believer that none of us got here on our own. I'm a firm believer in the collective power of we, right? All of our stories are kind of intertwined. The more I can grow, the more I can blossom. Hopefully that means that that's going to inspire the next generation to take heights even taller than mine. So I think it's just a collective narrative. Coming out of college, I was a teacher, and I quickly realized that I was not cut for classroom teaching. It takes a certain type of individual, but I was also very young, right? Still learning who I was. But I'll just say briefly, when I made the decision to leave the classroom, those young people left such an indelible mark and influence on me. And, many of them now are young adults. Some of them are parents of their own children. But, I left that situation and I said to myself, whatever I do in life, I got to ensure that these young people that I came across, these brilliant young minds who are still in the midst of growing and developing, right? If I could do something to ensure that the generation that comes after them has access to more opportunities, access to develop their voice, to develop their sense of self, and always be reminded of the agency and control that they have over their lives, then that's what I wanted to do. Because I just look back on my life and my life's journey, and I see all of the individuals, so many countless faces who helped get me to where I am today. And so to me, it was just simple about kind of paying it forward. And that's kind of what's kind of guided me to this day.
Tell us a little bit about going from, where you were and coming out of college in this sort of, crisis mode, right? Because that's what was going on in the world. And then, finding this path, and then, reading from your bio and learning a little bit about you, seeing that at one point you decide to, have your own also consulting company and sort of, what, in addition to everything else that you do, I wonder what was the incentive for that, kind of coming out of, what sounds like a really successful program, My Brother's Keeper, and then, and now Bloomberg Philanthropies. And was there something in particular that you were sort of motivated to address or respond to?
That's interesting. It's kind of a funny story, but this is the world works in mysterious ways. So we started the program in 2016. We saw immediate promise, just primarily by leaning into who these young men were. Many of these young men were considered to be quote unquote bad kids, right? I've never, in all my years of working in school, have never entered a school building and not run into a young person, usually a boy, who labeled himself as bad. And I'm a firm believer that, one of my heroes, Brian Stevenson, he's quoted as saying that each of us is more than the worst thing that we've ever done. right? And these young men, 13, 14 years old, have already kind of believed that they are this one thing. I'm bad, right? And so, of course, then if you believe that, that's going to lead you to not do good things, right? You're going to lean into this identity. And so we wanted to kind of flip the narrative, but make them make that decision on their own by providing them spaces and places and opportunities for them to discover all of the goodness that exists inside of them. And so that's why we saw these immediate improvements, not just in their attendance, but also in their behavior. The majority of the young men who were in the program over that 2-year trial period didn't receive any type of behavioral infraction or out of school suspension and things of that nature. Fast forward 2 years, it's pretty much the end of the 2018 school year. And I had just proposed to my now wife, and a week later I was laid off. Unfortunately, the organization I was working for, their contract was not renewed with the school system here in New York City. And so it was like totally caught me off guard, right? I just spent all the last 2 years saving up all this money to buy this ring. And now it's like, what am I going to do next? And you know what? What I recognize is that I had this innate ability. Is something I believe I'm called to do, which is to support boys, young men of color in any way I can, particularly through mentoring supports. And so it just really imbued me with not just the confidence, but the urgency to create something, to transfer and translate the outcomes, the quality experience, both for myself and also the young people I was working with, and translate that into something with a little infrastructure, and put a logo behind it, put my name behind it, and ultimately utilize my relationships that I've able to build, my social capital, through the various places and spaces that I've encountered while doing this mentoring work, and been able to, create something for myself. And that wasn't something I initially went in. No one could have told me in 2016 what we would create would ultimately be the foundation for this agency today. But I'm so grateful, honestly, for being laid off, because if I didn't, I probably wouldn't be in the position, whether it's working with Bloomberg Philanthropies or I've decided to go ahead and found this consultant agency, Bridge the Gap, if I was still working in the school system. So it was certainly a blessing in disguise, for sure.
I'm reviving memories, because during that period, you and I had conversations, and we actually had one in-person conversation, believe it or not, in Queens. At that time, we went to the gallery, then we hung out there. Yep. And you were really mulling, and any conversation I thought was really impressive with you is because you kept coming back to your core message and the thing you loved the most about your work and yourself, and where you thought you could bring value. And it was tough. And I know, because it was like, you could maybe pivot it to different things and say, here's my sidebar. This is something I could do on the side. But holding on to that takes courage. And it wasn't like somebody was running over to you with a blank check, as when I remember at that table where we're sitting and talking about. So it was a big decision. So I think you also represent when you have basically a high purpose, like you said, calling to you and really working for that. So I have more to say after. It's big. Keep going.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's always inspiring to me, and I think our listeners appreciate this as well. Is what sets someone on a particular path, and you clearly had this. It's more than a passion; it's like a vocation, really, and then it gets placed into something that seems like it fits the bill, right? Teaching, but then, oh wait, that's not really for me after all. So now what? And then you find this other thing. And then you get laid off. Oh, well, so now what? And then you create, but you've never lost sight of purpose, I think is the word, actually, of that sense. And it's always, so I think I came to my purpose when I was in my 30s. So I'm always very impressed with someone who can, who's had that for a long time. And it's your purpose when you don't get swayed by things like, well, I just got laid off. And I just proposed, by the way. And so now you're kind of, all these things that you had in mind for your life, suddenly they're kind of topsy-turvy, right? And yet you still pursued that. I don't know if there's a question there, but it's more of a comment. And, and I wonder what your reflection on that, kind of looking back, because you said, you wouldn't have been able to know that.
Right.
But is that, do you feel like that's fair to say that, you had a sense of purpose very early on in your life?
It's interesting. In your opening question, Jerome, I was mulling over, these individuals who are part of my village, and one of the pillars of that village for me, and I think it'll answer your question as well. The first mentor I ever had in my life was my godfather. I knew him. I called him Uncle Bill. His name was William Bradley, and he was my godfather. He was one of my father's closest friends. And, he kind of stepped in as like a pseudo father during the early developmental stages of my life. When you talk about purpose now, I didn't necessarily know I was going to be doing the work that I'm doing today when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, running around his office space. But I did know one thing. And the one thing I did know is that I would go to university. I would go to college after I graduated high school. And Uncle Bill, is the number one reason why that was, because at the time, when I was still in elementary school, still an adolescent, he was an educational opportunity fund counselor at Livingston College, which is now part of the greater Rutgers University network. But
Oh, wow.
so as an EOF counselor, I got to spend time on Livingston College campus, walking the halls, roaming the dining halls, for example. Got to spend some time in some of these lecture hall style, classrooms, and then also got the opportunity to meet young people who were his students that were part of his caseload. And he was a mentor to them, right? And I just saw, subconsciously, I'm just seeing this man, right? This Black man who I had this immense sense of pride and admiration for, and see how he was able to laugh and joke and connect with these young people in a way in which, they respected him as a professional, but they also had this familial relationship with each other. And so I have to attest that sense of purpose to those kind of incidences. I can't necessarily call a particular episode. Nothing really sticks out because I was so young at the time, but it was so impressionable being in that college space, being on a campus, having my godfather, who was my father figure at the time, bring me on the campus. He used to dress me up in Rutgers apparel. I just knew I was going to go to school, whether it was Rutgers, in which I ended up going, or another university or college. And so, that sense of purpose, even as I reflect on it now, I feel was transferred to me at a very early age, even before I could probably tie my shoes, to be completely frank, on my own. So it's kind of worked that way. And a lot of people look at my story and say, you grew up in a single parent household, and a lot of that often means that you're automatically placed at risk for some adverse childhood experiences. And if I was to recollect, there was definitely some trauma involved in my upbringing. My mom had to deal with long bouts of unemployment and things of that nature. But once again, community, whether it was our church community, whether it was extended family and friends, or whether it was people that I went to school with and their parents, right? This community just kind of enveloped us. And when things were difficult, when we didn't necessarily know if we could keep the lights on, right? This community was there to step up. And so I just knew how blessed I was, despite being in some difficult situations, that when you have community around you and you have people that are looking out for you, whether it's deliberately or not deliberately, you have a better chance of making it through life. And so, all of these different experiences really helped me recognize and realize the importance of paying it forward, being able to be in a position now where I can help someone in a meaningful way. I've never lost sight of the people who helped me. And so all of that's kind of coalesced into, me keeping this sense of purpose, mentorship, of helping the next generation, of paying it forward, pouring into people, because so much was poured into me as a young person.
So Garrett, you have given me insight into something I've commented to you before and shared with Jerome at an earlier conversation. And now I understand a little bit, because I have a picture of you in my head when the program you were part of moved to the Bronx, when the division that I was part of. We went from Manhattanville on the west side of New York to the Bronx. And it was a big, huge room, one of those multi-purposes room. It's the gym, it's the cafeteria, it's the meeting rooms. It was bedlam because we had parents, you had kids. The kids had their siblings running around, babies were crying, teachers are running around, volunteers are wandering around, and you just stood there.
Mhm.
So that little mini you that started off in Rutgers getting comfortable, you see, but there was something that embodied your spirit. It wasn't just stage presence. It
Mhm.
was presence to bring everybody into a place of listening, stillness, and you didn't raise your voice. And I remember sitting there going, this was worth getting on the train just to see this, because it was masterful, but it came from your heart and it came from someplace deeper. And you listened and you got people to pay attention, do what they're supposed to do during that session and really learn. But that also came through even the first couple of times I met you as a supervisor and hanging out and talking to you, and how you listened and a presence. You gave that to the mentors, you gave that to the people who were working with the students, you gave that respect.
Yeah.
And it didn't come from ego. So I'm giving you a big advertisement here, because it's not something you can train. Say, here, take this class and do this. Something has to come from within. I think you are passing that forward to your students. And fair play to Uncle Bill for letting you roam free and give you structure on Rutgers. I hope you have pictures. You better send me one. I gotta tell you.
I will definitely. I'll definitely
Okay.
find you all.
You should add this to the posting. I think that'd be great if you can do that
Yeah,
and bring it to the posting. That would be awesome.
I'll look into the
Thank you.
archives. As you were,
Okay.
as
Get
you were
Tiffany
speaking,
on it. Okay.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. As you were speaking, it really made me think of one of kind of like the core values that not just guide, my work with Bridge the Gap or my work with Bloomberg Associates, but just in my personal life. And hearkening back once again to one of my heroes, Brian Stevenson, who's been a huge inspiration, right? I'll never forget, he was giving a TED Talk, and he talked about, I believe the TED Talk was actually entitled The Power of Proximity. And in essence, what he was talking about, right, because this is a man who, goes into the prison system, is working with, young people, right? Some of them as young as 12, 13 years old, looking at life sentences, right? Some of these young people are in adult prisons, and you just hear these horrific stories that he shared. And he said, sometimes he just had to get close to these young men and actually like console them, right? And he would be the first kind of warm, gentle man or just adult that would be around them and to just give them hope to continue to persevere as he worked, night and day to try to get them, out of their situation. And this whole idea about power of proximity is just recognizing, regardless of individual's background, regardless of the demographics that you may find, we often use the terminology, at-risk youth and things of that nature, and it has its credence certain times, but we can't necessarily look at these young people as at risk. These young people have brilliance about them, as does everybody, right? I'm a firm believer that the closer you get into proximity, particularly with the people that you intend to serve, the better your services will be, because you're no longer looking at them as a client or as a customer, but you're looking at them as a partner who comes with all of this invaluable lived experience. I'm a firm believer that we all are the experts of our own story. We're the experts of our own journey, right? And so how can I, as a consultant, lean into that expertise? So whether it's you as a volunteer mentor or the young lady that you are mentoring, leaning in and learning about who she was, right? Outside of, being a student at KIPP, right? But, were you a sibling, right? What music were you into? What do you want to do or like to do with your friends and in your free time? And, showing that immense amount of just care and appreciation for the things that make a person their individual self, that unique self, right? And leaning into that knowledge to help gather them when I needed them to listen, when I needed them to write emails to their mentor. And, it's just that sense of respect. But most importantly, they recognize like, oh, Mr. G, he's a cool guy. I'll send this email, even though I don't really want to, because he's taken the time out to like hear my story to be interested and intrigued about who I am as an individual beyond what I may be able to do for him as a program coordinator, as a teacher, or as a mentor, and things of that capacity. So I'm a firm believer, you got to trust people to know what's best for them, and then work with them to figure out how you can provide the things that they may not be fully aware of that can help improve their situation.
You know, it's amazing to me, everything you're talking about is very resonates a lot, because so many in our work around storytelling, you know, so much of it is about listening, really, and creating a space in which it's possible for people to actually tell stories. And what you just described there, you know, that people are the experts in their own stories, their own lives, is something that we repeat a lot, because otherwise there's the trappings of something like youth at risk, you know, something like that. Immediately, if you ask someone to tell them, you know, tell them about yourself, you know, whatever you're asking them to, without much of a framework, in their own minds, because they know that you're there because they're at risk, they're going to come up with some kind of, you know, perhaps traumatic story, you know, or something that's about a struggle, or something that's really about representing what you were talking about earlier, you know, something that we did that was bad, you know, this is why I'm a bad boy or whatever. But when you open it up and indicate to people that you're just there to listen, and that you're actually interested in all these other things that make up a human being, not just this one part that somebody's labeled. And you're right. I mean, there are some, you know, things that are helpful about labels, but the vast majority of things are not that helpful to the person themselves, right? It's usually helpful to somebody else, so that we can kind of figure out where that person belongs in their care or support, et cetera. But then when you're actually with them, it sounds to me like a lot of your job as a mentor, and all these people that do this work with young people in particular, is really to endeavor to sort of have all of that melt away, like, forget about the at-risk thing. I'm not here for that. And that takes something to be able to, you know, make that assumption go away about you, because otherwise, if someone knows that you're a mentor from Bridge the Gap or Bloomberg or wherever you're coming from, there must be something in people's minds of like, oh, they're coming because I've been in trouble before, and they're going to help me get out of trouble, or whatever, whether that's conscious or not. And so I love everything you said, because I think it seems to me like that's really the work, actually. It's whatever you're bringing and how you open someone up in the face of all those labels.
Absolutely. You know, it's so easy to lean upon, you know, our implicit or unconscious bias, right? And that's been a, you know, a buzzword for the last few years in the diversity, equity, inclusion space. But the reality is, right, we all have to kind of be normed and grounded in the fact that we need those implicit biases in order to get through life, right? Like, if we had to always lean upon if we always had to like make decisions and have to really lean into like conscious thought and effort, we wouldn't be able to get anywhere, right? Sometimes you do have to kind of like make quick decisions and say yay or nay, like I'm either going to go left or right? But when you're talking about like mentorship, right, and this is whether you're dealing with adults or dealing with young people, you really have to be very conscious of the unconscious bias, right? You know, I'm very much aware of the fact that I'm a Black man, and at one point, you know, a Black man before Jules, this before you met me, I was a Black man with long locks, right? And before that, like long braids. And, you know, there's a lot of preconceived notions that just came into just like my physical appearance, right? And then once, you know, people started the opportunity to get to talk to me and get to figure out who I was, you know, a lot of that judgment goes away. And I always felt so uncomfortable knowing, because sometimes you just know people based on their countenance and their nonverbals and things of that nature, whether or not this person is giving you an actual opportunity to see you beyond just what they see with their eyes, right? And so it was so important to me when I worked with young people, right, that I never wanted young people to feel judged, no matter what their track record was, no matter what the grades said, right? And, I didn't reach every young man in that Queens high school, right? It was literally impossible for one person to work against a system that, was indoctrinating these young people, getting them to live with the fact that you either good or bad. But, I gave every young man an opportunity to show me who he really was, right? Outside of what, your disciplinary record said or your academic record said. And I think that's ultimately why these young men, many of them, once again, labeled the bad boys of the school, were committed to this space because they didn't necessarily enter that space with any kind of assumption that people were judging them. Majority of the people that they saw in that space were their friends, right? These are young men who shared similar backgrounds and things of that nature. But I think the real key here, which really made it successful, was the fact that we entrusted their peers, right? These are individuals who are only 2 to 3 years older than them. And we made sure that we selected young people who weren't necessarily your valedictorians or your salutatorians, but these were young people who, had struggled, but continued to persevere, leaned heavily upon a spirit of resiliency, and also saw themselves as leaders, right? And we were just able to illuminate that for them by giving them this opportunity to, manage small cohorts of young men to help mentor them. And it was a beautiful thing to see because, in part, I didn't have to do that much work once the relationships were cemented, right? It was just, all I had to do was ensure that there was food, that there was a beverage, and that there was a place for us to meet. And the young people kind of owned the space and took ownership over the relationships and held each other accountable. And so that's some of the brilliance that comes when you're just able to see a person for who they are, as opposed to, what the world tells you who they are, right? And so it's a daily task. It requires daily practice, requires immense amount of attention and considerable reflection on oneself. But the more you can enter into each and new relationship with an open mind and recognize, right, that we all have a story here. And there's so much more that brings us together than that takes us apart in our individual journeys. Once we get people to open up about those stories, there's tremendous opportunity, there's endless opportunities for connection, for achievement, for community building and things of that nature. So working on that consistently is a great way to help, kind of push through all of the noise and really get to the core of who someone is.
It's such a great lesson, everything you've just said, not just one lesson, many lessons in communication, really, because you said it yourself, it's not just for young people, it's for adults too. And the way we listen and, kind of being able to break through those preconceived notions. And that so much of that comes from our ability to listen in the face of, something that may be foreign to us or just hasn't been in our consciousness, and kind of break through that sort of surprise of it, and but keep listening and keep being present and see what happens then. And I love the way you ended that there. Now all it takes is just having a space and some food there, and people show up, and it's kind of like you can let them have their community, essentially, that you've helped to build. And I think that's such a great lesson for anyone, who's, I think, especially these days, we have a lot of listeners who are in the business world, and, and we've been talking about with Jules about, the various headlines that are coming up and layoffs, and is there going to be a recession? Is there not? All these things that are creating a lot of anxiety. And how do I communicate about myself? How do I express my own value and differentiate myself and all these things? And how do I keep listening in the face of all this fear and anxiety and uncertainty? And I think what you're offering is such a great kind of model in a way, because you're going right into the heart of it, where there is a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of uncertainty, and yet you're finding incredible results and outcomes, human outcomes, where you see people kind of rising above that label that was put on them, and it sounds like they're constantly surprising, those people who probably put the label on them.
Absolutely. I'll say one of my key mantras. This is a favorite quote of mine. Unfortunately, I don't know who to attribute it to. I would take it as my own, but I'm a man of integrity. But one of my favorite quotes is that I heard recently is that every young person is a mentor away from a success story. And when we think about the stories that we carry, right? I mean, that's literally true for all of us, right? There's part of the reason why I do this work and so passionate about it. I mean, it's so simple to me when you really think about it. If you were just to sit and take 2 minutes to reflect on your career journey, your personal life journey, whether or not you was, raised by your parents or raised in the foster care system or raised by a older sibling or a relative or things of that nature, right? From the moment we're brought here to the moment we leave, there's hands, right? There's physical and sometimes figurative hands that are carrying us along the way, even when we can't carry ourselves, right? There's shoulders in the literal and in the figurative sense that we're able to lean upon, that we're able to cry upon and call upon when we need a shoulder to lean on. And I'm just very aware that, life is so precious. It's and it's something to be cherished. And one of those things that we have to cherish is the fact that we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the care, for the love and the attention of not just family members, but of absolute, complete, total strangers, right? Maybe these strangers now become, friends and associates, colleagues, and things of that nature. But so many things are working without our even awareness or knowledge to help us get to the next place. And ultimately, those workings, those machinations are being controlled by people, right? Human beings who have their own story. And most of those people, Jules, I probably would attest it to you as well, right? Like these are individuals who can recognize, and when they look at a young person, they can see, I see a little bit of me in this young person, regardless of cultural, racial, ethnic, shared identity markers and things of that nature. I see something about myself, and I can remember when I was 16, 17 years old, just trying to figure it out, just trying to find out who I was as a person, what my voice is, what kind of mark I want to make in this world. And, when you see that in another young person, right, it just compels you to get a little bit closer, get in a little bit more proximity with that young person. And, you can create endless possibilities for that one life. And now they've created that. Now you've helped write a chapter, be a part of that success story. And now they get to go ahead. There's nothing more, I think, more rewarding in this work. Jules, I'm sure you can attest to this, when you can kind of let things go and kind of let them blossom and be their own kind of individual self, right? Hopefully they were able to build that courage and bravery while under your stewardship, under your guidance. But ultimately, when it's time to say, I'm no longer needed here, you can allow them to go off and hopefully return to do and give back to another young person. So I truly believe this is how we make the world go round, right? The song goes, people make the world go round. And I think mentorship is also how you make the world go round for sure.
I think that's such a great message. We may have covered this through some of your answers earlier, but there's a question that we ask of all our guests, and it's always the same. And we love to ask that same question because then we get kind of a tapestry of variety and diversity in those answers, and also that connection you just talked about, that underneath it all, we're all human beings that go through things, and a lot of those things are very relatable, even though we don't have the same background, same race, ethnicity, et cetera, et cetera. And so I want to ask you, is there an experience that you can point to that still you feel shapes who you are today, that still informs who you are, it still influences you? I know we talked about Uncle Bill, and maybe that's him, but I'm wondering if there's an experience in particular that still drives you or guides you today.
You know what? I'm going to say, most in terms of a particular experience, I think about that time, being unemployed and trying to kind of make my way for sure. But, I'm going to have to harken back to my kind of first summer internship. I guess you could call it internship. I was introduced to this program called the Freedom School, which was created by or overseen by this organization called the Children's Defense Fund. Right, Edelman was the founder of the Children's Defense Fund. And this Freedom School experience for me really just set my hair on fire and just really let me realize that like being around young people, I can create and do so much, and also experience an immense amount of joy, an immense amount of purpose in my work. I spent the entire summer getting up at probably like 6 a.m. to get on a train for a 45-minute train ride to Newark, New Jersey, and had to get there at like 7:30. It's like being in summer school. It's like summer detention, but it wasn't, because the reason why I got up every morning at 6 a.m. is because I would get to this location. We were, I believe, in West Market Street. I can't recall the exact name of the church building that we were housed in, but we would spend the first 30 minutes or so engaging in what was called Harambe, which was for me just kind of like just unmitigated, unadulterated joy through like song, dance, cheers, things of that nature. And it was really a way to wake us up, right? Physically, but also spiritually, right? It was a way to get the young people really geared up, amped up, and excited about the day. And, Freedom School is all about, instilling in young people, particularly young people from like inner city and urban communities, instilling in these young people a certain passion and enthusiasm for literacy. And the curriculum that we would use would be all about culturally enriching activities and storytelling. And so every story, every author, every activity that we engage these young people in always reflected back to them what their future self could look like. And, I worked with a group of uprising fifth graders at that time. And so, still very young, but also very much independent, creative, outgoing, things of that nature, and a small classroom. And, that story sticks with me in particular because, it convinced me, one, that I am an early morning person. Two, and more importantly, I think no matter, and I don't even know what I was getting paid at that time as like what they called the servant leader intern. But two, if you find a community in which you feel like you are being welcomed, that you feel like your presence and your contributions matter and are having some type of meaningful impact, whether it's on the young people you are serving, or your colleagues who are peers, or the executives that you will report to, if you could find a community like that, pay will come through the just the youthful exuberance, vigor, and intensity that you brought to your day-to-day toils in this particular work. And so that really has kept me really motivated and inspired to see, what's possible when you bring a coalition or collective of people together for a common cause or purpose. If I may follow up, another kind of really impactful story, and I'll be brief. Before I came to iMentor, before I had the pleasure of meeting you, Jules, I worked on President Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. Most random opportunity I could think of, because once again, I was unemployed. And before the 2016, 2018 situation, this was like kind of my first bout of unemployment. I left the classroom, didn't necessarily know what I was going to do. Had to move back home with my mom. What am I going to do? I found some work doing some mentorship work, just like mentoring some young boys. But I got a text message from a fraternity brother saying, would you be interested in, going to Ohio? Never been to Ohio, right? Never been to the Midwest. I get in my small Toyota Yaris. They don't even make these cars anymore, right? And me and a buddy from college, we drive from Newark, New Jersey, halfway across the country, overnight, end up in Columbus, and then shortly thereafter, Toledo, Ohio. And I end up like bunking it with these like supporters, like local Democrat supporters who are like host families, basically. And I spent my summer with these individuals in the middle of, I guess that was northwestern Ohio, in the state of Ohio. And I spent every single day, canvassing, getting folks registered, but also ultimately I came across this group of young people, right, who attended one of the local high schools, and kind of took them under my wing and kind of allowed them to kind of, volunteer with me, but also, look them out with like food and different kind of swag, and brought them to the office and that kind of stuff. And once again, we built this community. Everybody who was in that office was from different parts of the country, some from different parts of the world. And when we won that night, right, you could not match. You wouldn't be able to tell us the little bit of money we were getting paid, because we got so excited, like we just won like the World Cup, like we just won right the Super Bowl, right? The way we felt that night when Obama got reelected. And it really, I was able to take a step back a few days later, and I came across, I believe it was Margaret Mead's quote about, never doubt the power of or what's possible when you bring a group of people together for a common cause or purpose. And it really made me realize, like, wow, like if you could bring, and if you could bring all these different kind of people from all these different types of walks of life together and give them a common cause or a common purpose, you can really change the world. And sure enough, that's how the world changes. That's how the world moves. When you can bring people together, regardless of their faith, their background, their upbringing, their orientations, and you can bring them together in a common cause or purpose. That's how you make history. That's how you affect change. And ultimately, for me, right, that's how you leave the world a better place than for the generation coming behind you. And if there's just one young person who could say, when it's time for me to go, that Mr. G helped me get to where I'm at today, whether they were able to tell me to my face or not, then I know I lived a well-deserved and a meaningful and purposeful driven life. So I'm extremely grateful for both of those opportunities, because I never would have thought I would have been able to do it at that time.
So the one word that keeps coming up to my mind the whole session, and you take a talented person and guarantee, they always say it's so simple. All you have to do is X, Y, and Z and show up. But the one word that keeps coming to mind when you're talking is joy. Mm-hmm. And you're sharing your joy about the human experience you have with the connection. And your joy is not coming from a place of ego, like, I'm going to teach you because it's going to make me feel like, domination. Your joy about just the connection, people getting excited, or a kid showing up in the room and showing up. He came and he talked to somebody else. Big moment. Maybe never had that experience and not being that comfortable or being accepted. So joy comes through everything. So you spread joy in Ohio. I know you were in DC. You were everywhere in metropolitan New York. But now you're going to London. So in the few minutes we have, why don't we talk about what you've been doing there, this mission? You are our best export, I got to say. You have a lot of good export. And I keep thinking of somebody too. We've talked about Cormac Russell. He, one of our previous guests, talking about how he talks from going, I'm going to mess up his quote, but instead of addressing what's wrong, to go start with what's strong and build from there. So you two need to connect with each other. But go on, tell us about London.
Yeah. I was just in London last week, and it was fantastic. We had last Tuesday was the first kind of in-person gathering of Mayor Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London's London Anchor Institution Network. So coming out of the pandemic, London, as any other city, right, recognized that there was gross inequities that existed across, various communities, particularly marginalized, minority ethnic communities, when it came to also like small and minority owned businesses, as well as young people, right? Young people who were already, struggling with, just their sense of who they were and their place in the world in terms of mental health, as well as prospects for the future in terms of like employment opportunities, apprenticeships, and things of that nature. And so the mayor said, we got to make sure that coming out of this pandemic, we build back a better London for this generation and for future generations to come. And the way we're going to go about doing that is by building this London Anchor Institution Network. So when we say anchor institutions, we're referring to the National Health system, referring to transport for London. So that's their tubes, their busing, right? Their public transportation system. We're looking at the university system. So University of London, the Association of Colleges, which is in essence their community college support system, as well as like Film London. All of these various like large employer, large reach, large imprint across the city, right? How do we leverage these organizations to build back a more equitable city? And I, in particular, came on board, I would say, coming up on 2 years to support what is known now as their New Deal for young people. So Mayor Khan, I want to say it's been about a year, he made the pledge right around February of 2022. He made the pledge to ensure that by the end of 2024, 100,000 young Londoners in need, they call them young Londoners, they don't really use the word youth, but they say young people, young Londoners, 100,000 young Londoners will be matched to a quality trained mentor and or have access to quality local youth support services or local youth activities. And so I've been supporting the mayor, the City of London, the Greater London Authority, which is in essence City Hall, an extension of City Hall, supporting on how do we galvanize, energize, and enthuse, starting with our anchor institutions and then trickling down to other private and public sector organizations, and then ultimately to everyday London resident, right? How do we get you to say, I want to be a mentor, I want to be able to support the next generation of young Londoners, right? And so working on that initiative, right, getting us, we're already halfway towards our goal, which is fantastic, just based on actual physical count of young people that we serve. But something that I'm really, truly proud of, London, up until a few short months ago, didn't have any infrastructure or any kind of framework in place to actually help them say in so many words, this is what quality youth mentoring actually looks like. And so one of my proudest accomplishments in this particular project was helping London create and develop its first ever, what is now known as the Mentor Quality Framework. So this was inspired by Mentor USA's elements for effective mentoring practice. So this framework comes with about, I think, 8 quality standards. It's for any and every volunteer community-based organization in London who has any interest in supporting young people. This is kind of your go-to. This is your Bible for what good quality mentoring is going to look like. And it actually consists not just of these quality standards, but also a self-assessment. So any organization, whether you are in the voluntary community sector or you are a for-profit organization, you can go through this self-assessment, be able to identify your areas of strength, as well as areas for growth, and you can submit to the Mayor of London, the Greater London Authority, your mentoring improvement plan, and receive one-to-one consulting, coaching, and technical assistance to help you either establish your own mentoring program or help improve the current services that you are rendering to young Londoners. And so that was released, I would say, back in right around Thanksgiving of last year. And it's really helped us kind of, I guess you could say, put in no so fewer words, right? This is what good mentoring looks like. This is how we know good mentoring is happening. And I think it really helped the mentoring field across London really have something to gravitate towards and make sure that we're speaking a common language, right? And the more clear and cohesive our messaging can be about why mentoring is so important, particularly mentoring young people, I think the more we can ensure not only that we reach our goal, but for me, it's about ensuring that London becomes a youth first and youth a city that cares about its young people, and that the young people born into that and growing up in that city understand that this city cares about me, because there's so many various resources, from individuals to communities to my boroughs and to the city at large, various avenues and opportunities for me to receive support, whether it be through mentorship, through local youth clubs, or local youth activities. So it's been a tremendous ride. I've been telling folks we're literally building the plane as we're trying to take it off the on-ramp. And I'm happy to say we got one wing together. So we're flapping in the wing with one wing. Check in with me at the end of the year to see if we got that second wing attached.
Wonderful.
Yeah, this has really been just a wonderful talk, and so many lessons, like I was mentioning before. I think just around mentorship, obviously, but I think, you know, the simple kind of communication principles that guide you, and then, you know, these tremendous results. And right now, what you just described in London, clearly this is not, you know, sort of something that is true for just one community. Clearly, this is true for many, many people. And I think that, you were saying earlier when it's kind of the end of the road for you and in your life, and you're sort of reflecting back, and if you've changed one person, then that's great. I think there's many, many people that you're changing already, and your impact is really tremendous. And I really really commend you for everything you've been able to do, and going through all these moments in life that you just described to us, where things were kind of uncertain and unknown for you, and how you navigated that. I think it's tremendously helpful for anyone listening, to hear that it's not just it's I always say this to clients in particular, who are learning to tell stories. Well, shouldn't everything just be positive and up and up? Well, no, because that's not life. It's just not believable, right? We all go through ups and downs, and you did too, and we all did, and it's kind of what we make of those moments that really matters. So, just want to really thank you for sharing all of these experiences with us, and ask you if there's anything that you would want to leave our listeners with, any a particular website or maybe something to inspire them?
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Jerome, because I think one of the awakenings that I've had is that the more you kind of lean into what some may consider your failures or your setbacks, I think that's where you really truly find out what you're made of and who you are. And I think it's been my willingness to be open, vulnerable, and transparent, in particular when talking with young people who are trying to kind of find their footing in terms of their career trajectories and things of that nature. And I let them know that, yes, this is not there's not an incline. You don't just get on the escalator and just consistently go up, right? You are going to, make some mistakes. You're going to tumble backwards. But the difference between the people who can get to that next step and the people who kind of stay stagnant is that they just continue to fail forward, right? And so lean into those failures, be honest about them, be willing to talk about them, because those experiences, in the moment, it's going to feel terrible. It's going to suck at the end of the day. But when you look back on your life, when you're able to look at those things in the rear view, you can honestly say, my decision to continue to move forward, despite how terrible it felt at that moment, is exactly why I'm in this position now. And so now I'm able to share my joy just as much as some of my poor moments or failures, to let young people know that it'll be all right, right? You'll make some mistakes, but we all make mistakes, and it's okay, because I'm still here, and my mistakes ultimately didn't define who I was, but they did help give me a sense of self, and let me know that I can overcome some challenges in my life. I would say, definitely encourage people to, this is always where it gets awkward, because I still struggle, although I love sharing my story, I do struggle self-promoting. So I'm gonna work on that. But the truth is, definitely check out the Mentoring Quality Framework. Even if you're not based in London, if you just Google Mentoring Quality Framework, London or City of London, it'll pop up for you. We don't have like a clean URL link, so I apologize about that. If you want to though reach out to me personally, find out what I got going on, you can check my personal website, which is mrgrichardson.com. That's MRG Richardson, just like how it sounds, .com. You can also follow me on my Twitter handle at Mr. G Richardson as well, and LinkedIn as well. I love LinkedIn for the opportunities to connect and help people. So you could just do a simple search at Garrett Richardson to find me on LinkedIn. On my personal website, though, my aim this year is to do a little bit more writing, share a little bit more, not just of my story, but what I've learned in terms of mentorship and the power and importance and the transformation that you experience, not just when you are mentoring someone, but when you are receiving mentoring as well. So I'm going to be sharing a lot more of my voice through the written word on my website. So definitely come along and follow me on that journey. But yeah, I guess that's where you can find me. That's where you can find me online and in the internets.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
So I'm going to coach you now and say, when you say you don't want to talk or share, what would you tell your mentees to do?
Yeah,
You would
right.
say, shout it out, own it, post it, tell it. How's anyone going to know? So we teach what we want to teach ourselves, I think, or
appreciate that.
coach. Yes. And if you need somebody to sit down and be that person on the other side of the interview mic to get you talking and capturing sound bites, I raise my hand. Always a pleasure. I am so glad I walked into your office so long ago and annoyed you. And started having a conversation.
Likewise.
It was a gift. It was a gift that started
it
a whole
was.
great friendship. Thank you.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Well, yes, indeed, a great gift to have you on our podcast, and I really appreciate all of your insights, and I know our listeners do too. And I want to thank our listeners as well, and tell them to please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, because that's what drives the word of mouth. And as always, if you want to learn more about Narrative, the company behind this podcast, you can go to narrative.com, which is NARATIV.com, for information on how you can find, craft, and present the stories that are really going to engage your audiences like nothing else has before. I think this episode has been a great illustration of the power of storytelling and, how we can use it to great effect. And of course, you'll find a lot of resources. Our podcast is posted on our website. Our blog is also posted on our website, and you can find lots of free resources and links to help you. We are always ready to listen to you and to your challenges. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And I want to thank you again, Jules, for making this connection and for being my wonderful co-host.
My face hurts. I'm smiling too much.
I know. This is
trying
great.
to keep my eyes open because they get so tiny when I'm smiling. But I've just been so happy to see you and hear this. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. G, once again. And we'll see you next time. And thanks everyone for listening.
All right. Take care, folks. Thank you, guys.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.